I'm just guessing into this. I'm not a scholar of this shit. I have no clue. I'm literally learning as I go, and I'm making these videos as I learn, so mistakes will be made. I'm going to be looking at my notes a lot for this because I'm not that great at memorizing scripts, so forgive me. So is Beowulf really one poem, or is it two poems that were stitched together by different scribes at different times? Okay. The Beowulf manuscript, officially known as the Cotton Vitellius A XV, was written at some point between 975 and 1025. We know this because the first half of it was written in a type of vernacular and handwriting that was kind of going out of style at the time, and the second half was written in a style that was kind of catching on. So we have this 50-year period around that time. That's the only real kind of thing that I can find that we've got for dating this thing. I have a book over there from Sam Newton about the origins of Beowulf, and so I want to get more into that in next week's video about the actual manuscript, who wrote it and when, and that kind of shit. So more details next week. So the first scribe wrote from line 1 to 1935a. That's when the second scribe took over. Written is, scholars believe that it's just one epic story, multiple rounds, right? Yes, it's definitely one big epic story written by multiple people. And if I take my copy of Seamus Heaney's copy translation, here we found a part where I've actually marked off the line where there's a handover, because I wanted to actually get a visualization on this myself. And so Beowulf has done his deeds, and then he's gone back to Geatland, and his king, Hygelac, is that his name, Hygelac? Pronunciation will be a whole nother video, trust me. I need to figure that shit out for myself anyway. But there's a massive recap, like almost 200 lines of recap. It's like you're catching the second part of a movie or the second episode of a TV show, and they're giving you a recap of what happened the last time, just so you can catch up. And that's when the second scribe took over. Moving on to the next part. There's another twist. Some argue that Beowulf isn't even in Old English. Because it all takes place in Scandinavia, in this case Denmark and Sweden, a lot of people are thinking that because of the events that we can actually date, and the people that we can actually date who lived around the 5th century, that these stories had just come over when the Jutes, Saxons and Angles came to England. And they came over here in what? Hengest came over in 449. Hygelac's death apparently was in 530, just off the coast of the Netherlands. And these were just stories that got passed around and whatever. So maybe these stories originated in Scandinavia, and Beowulf as a narrative was put together by people, scholars, scribes, bards, whatever you want to call them, over here. So maybe it wasn't even in English to begin with. It could have been Old Norse, Danish, Frisian, Geatish, any number of languages that were then translated into English and then written down a few hundred years later. Who knows? What have I got next on here? I've got my notes mentioned the Legier legend. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. I'm probably not, but we'll talk about that another time when I start making videos on the kind of like historical elements of Beowulf. Anyway, okay, so the first translation of Beowulf was in 1815 by, and I'm going to butcher this guy's name, by a Danish scholar called Grimer Jonsson Thorkellen. I'll put his name here so you can laugh at my pronunciation. But I can't seem to find like an old copy of this, whether it be first edition or a reprint. I can't find one. All I can really find is like a print on demand version, and I fucking hate those. So I'm not even going to bother looking at that. The first English translation by an Englishman was in 1837, although, having said that, Tolkien in this book, The Monsters and the Critics, mentions a guy whose name I can't remember now, it escapes me. He said he did a translation in 1920 or 1921. I need to do some more research on that and see if I can find a copy of that as well. But this one by John Mitchell Kemble, which came out in 1937, was titled The Anglo-Saxon Poems of Beowulf, The Traveller's Song and the Battle of Finsbury. The Battle of Finsbury is another important thing because it's a story told within within this, actually, the Seamus Heaney version of the book as well. But it's about a man named Hengest who came to, he's the guy who came to England in 449. Kind of began the whole Anglo-Saxon thing. So that's another piece of information I need to dive into and maybe start making videos on that as well at some point. Because I want to start making videos on the history surrounding all this as well. So there will be videos about Vikings at some point. Not that, you know. Yeah, anyway. Oh, look, scene 4. What does Beowulf actually mean? A direct translation, it means Beowulf, which is a kenning, which is a compound expression in Old English and Old Norse. So a Beowulf would be a bear, because, you know, bears apparently like beehives. Maybe they were reading too much Winnie the Pooh, who knows. Oh, back to that book. My notes say I should bring up this book again. So this is the Monsters and the Critics. It's a lecture that Tolkien gave in 1936, where he basically says that we should forget about all the historical significance of Beowulf and just look at it as a poem, a piece of fantasy, heroic men fighting dragons and monsters and all that kind of shit. But of course, he gave this lecture 2 months after he sent off the manuscripts of The Hobbit to the publishers, Allen and Unwin. Yeah, so he had a bit of skin in the game when it comes to men fighting dragons, or in his case, dwarves. So next week's video will be about the manuscript itself, a little bit of information about what it is, kind of the best we can do in terms of when it was written and who wrote it, and the story itself, the origins of all that kind of stuff. And the week after that, I want to get into that lecture. So that's the next few weeks sorted out. Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think Beowulf is one poem, or do you think it's 2 poems? Personally think it's 1. And I feel like the second scribe was recapping what had come before. I do have somewhere photos of the actual manuscripts. That's at the British Library, sorry. So finding that line and seeing if it was actually on a completely different piece of paper, piece of manuscript, or was it continued from the same one? Was he told that this part of the story had been written, so just do this, but he decided to recap it to get in the right headspace? Who knows? Was it Scandinavian in origin, or do you think that it was actually an original piece of work from Old English people back in the kind of like 8th century, or were they stories that came over and had been talked about for hundreds of years before that even happened? Who knows? Anyway, if you like this kind of video and you want to learn more about Beowulf in the coming weeks and months as I learn this stuff myself, because I'm just getting into this. I'm not a scholar of this shit. I have no clue. I'm literally learning as I go, and I'm making these videos as I learn, so mistakes will be made. So feel free to correct me in the comments below. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, because, you know, I need validation that I'm doing good in the world. Anyway, yeah. See you next week.